Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention, please? This is the work session for the Cuyahoga County Council, and this is our second work session. Although we do not have a meeting tonight, we have a number of matters to discuss, and we suspect that we'll be having these work sessions every Tuesday, whether or not we have a meeting or not, until we sort of get our house in order. And there's I guess we don't need to call the roll. Do we need to call the roll? Or? All right, go ahead and call the roll. Mr. Rogers indicated that he will be late. He will be here, but he'll be a little bit late.
Here. Here.
Mr. Schron?
Here.
Ms. Conwell?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Rogers? Ms. Simon? Mr. Greenspan?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Brady?
Present.
The quorum is present.
And Ms. Simon is probably on her way. She was tied up in a court hearing this afternoon over in Domestic Relations Court. We'll just go down the agenda that we published on the website, and for the public, we will be publishing these. Jean, what, like the afternoon of, or sometime earlier in the day, as to what we'll be discussing. We asked Mr. Kelly to come in from the. He's the deputy chief of staff for the Economic Development Commission, and that's a provision in the chart. And we asked him to come in to give us a kind of a brief overview of the Economic Development Commission and the kinds of things that they're going to be doing. There's a lot of discussion during the campaign for all of us, so we'd appreciate your overview. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. We are going to be having the inaugural meeting of the Economic Development Commission on Tuesday, January 25th, from noon to 5 p.m. at the Cleveland State University Student Center. Third floor. You'll be getting an email and some follow-up phone calls if they haven't happened already. Your attendance is encouraged but not required. As you know, Section 7.04 of the new county charter establishes the Economic Development Commission. The charter doesn't give explicit direction to the commission other than to say that it must meet quarterly, adopt its own rules and bylaws, and to participate in the creation of the 5-year economic development plan. That plan needs to be submitted to you by June 1st of this year. Dorothy Bonnick, our interim director of economic development, is going to be leading that effort and staffing the Economic Development Commission until the commission determines how it would like to do its own staff. But we are prepared to have the Department of Economic Development and the director to staff the Economic Development Commission. The charter requires that the executive and the economic development director keeps the commission informed of all current and anticipated economic development activity in the county. So the first meeting will start off with a business meeting that will include some direction from the county executive, ostensibly telling them what I just told you. We're going to review some bylaws that will be distributed to members of the commission and to the public for adoption by the commission, or at least discussion, potential adoption, and then also potentially choosing officers for the commission, probably just a chair and vice chair. The charter requires that the ED director and the executive keep the commission informed of all these things that are going on in terms of economic development. And so we'll start the business of what we're required to do by charter by informing the commission what is already underway. That'll start off with a determination of what the regional economy is. We will have a representative from the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland to present to the commission. Then we'll go through some of the economic development projects that are already underway, about $6 billion of projects that we can look forward to in the next couple of years. And then also from some other initiatives that were ranked highly as part of the Transition Advisory Group, Global Cleveland and entrepreneurship. Dorothy will also present on what the current state of the Economic Development Department is and some follow-up steps. There is some business that we need from the council, though. We've already received the council's appointment to the Economic Development Commission, which is going to be the chair of the Economic Development Committee. That's Mr. Schran. And here are the members of the commission. It is, and this is laid out by the county charter. The council has one appointment, the executive has one appointment, the mayor of Cleveland has one appointment, and in that order it is Councilman Schran, Executive Fitzgerald, Mayor Jackson. The Port Authority has one appointment, which we anticipate will be Will Friedman. They may need some board action to make it certain, but that's our expectation. The Cuyahoga Mayors and Managers Association has appointed Mayor Akers to represent them. The Greater Cleveland Partnership will be represented by Joe Roman. It's my understanding that he will serve, especially in the beginning, and then later that appointment may travel to one of their members or board members. And then the AFL-CIO is going to appoint Harriet Applegate to represent them. The draft bylaws that we will distribute will also provide for all of those appointees to designate an alternate in the event that one can't attend a meeting. Now there's two other appointments remaining on the Economic Development Commission. One is a representative of the nonprofit and educational organizations that are dedicated to economic development as defined by the county council. So the council has to determine the universe of who the economic development or who the educational and nonprofit organizations are that are engaged in economic development, and then determine the process for how that person would be designated. Now, there has been a lot of collaboration over the past several years by the nonprofit and educational institutions on economic development. The Fund for Their Economic Future is often looked at as an umbrella organization because they funded a lot of those things. They've attracted funding elsewhere. So if there are, I guess we'd have to work together. I could give some advice, but it'll be up to the commission or the council to decide how that appointment is made to the commission. And then the last member is the ninth member and is determined by the commission itself. So those 8 members will determine who their 9th colleague is.
Is there any driving thought behind that 8th member, the 8 members making the decision? Is there any theme or thought behind how they will decide that final member?
Well, they would have to choose it by a majority vote. The commission has not met yet. It has not been formally convened yet, and so they can't transact any business or even have that discussion. My hope would be that they include some diversity, both from who we're looking at, maybe a citizen or a representative of the private sector, but that would be something that's determined by the commission.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Schran, do you have any comment? Or?
Well, the question as far as in regards to the member coming from the council, the recommendation for that 8th person, I think it's a little confusing as far as at least my reading of whether that is coming from the group itself or whether we pick that individual from the group. What's your clarity as far as that specific item?
Murky.
At least we're both murky on that same subject. Perhaps the law director can give us some advice on that murkiness at the appropriate time.
And do you have any idea of how big a pool is of these nonprofit and educational organizations? So, I mean, that include like Cleveland State, Tri-C. I mean, what's your vision of those organizations?
That's a good question. There are a number of organizations that do things that are engaged in economic development. And so defining the universe of what even qualifies as economic development could be a challenge. Certainly, Cleveland State is engaged in economic development, both in practice and in research. There are a number of nonprofit organizations. So, and then also, how do you define economic development? An example would be my wife spearheads an organization that partners with a county organization called Invest in Children. It's called Groundwork. and they focus on early childhood education. The angle is that it's economic development to invest in early childhood education. Are they an organization that should be considered? I don't know. I would want to start a little bit more definitive, and it'd be nice to have more direction from the charter, but on this one, I'm just the messenger.
Madam President, one of the things that I've started at least to try to create is a list of those organizations that I have some familiarity with, just having seen them in town, Team NEO, Jumpstart, the folks from the Fund for Economic Future, the Magnet, you've got WireNet. I mean, organizations that have played an instrumental role in this community. So the list can get to be pretty extensive pretty quickly out there, and try and find one candidate out there. But I think that the importance is to have an inclusive list so that everybody feels at least they were considered, and then ultimately when you get down to the selection.
And I would be glad to staff the endeavor of whomever is working on the council on making that determination or recommendation to the council to help with that as far as contact information and engagement and outreach. At this point, there is no urgency to seat that appointment, but the work of the commission must begin because we owe you a deliverable by June 1st. That's going to be a significant one.
Madam President, I believe that was one of the agenda items that I was going to put on the very first agenda item for the council, the 7 members who are going to be sitting on the economic development side for us to look at, because that's a piece of business that we need to take care of. And so to bring forth those names, and if anybody on the economic development side of the council has names of associations or organizations or people committed to economic development and would like to submit it, whether it be from the nonprofit or from the educational side, please either email it to me, submit it, and even if you're not on that committee, by all means send a name forward to me.
Mr. Kelly, you alluded to the fact that you might be able to make some reference or suggestions in regard to the universe of educational institutions and nonprofits. I've played in my mind who they are. You alluded to being able to make some type of suggestion. I'll be willing to hear your 2 cents.
I'd like to do that in committee because I'd like to have more direction from the council on what you're looking for, and I want to help staff that endeavor. But I've got a lot of paper here, but no lists.
Any other questions? I think we passed the ball here to Mr. Schron on the Economic Development Committee, and then he can come up with a list and advise us at the appropriate time. All right, thank you. Anything further from Mr. Kelly? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam President, if I may call the roll for Ms. Simon.
Yes.
Here. Thank you.
See today notification from the county executive of the appointment of, or the recommendation for appointment for Sheriff Reed, Clerk Gerald First, and the person for, I'm pulling a blank, Public Work. And this, is it Tiwin? Tiwin. Okay. And I had, and so I signed off on those today, although the letter from Mr. Fitzgerald was it was neglected to be signed, so we probably have to clean that up tomorrow. So our time starts today on our 30 days for the appointments. So I had arbitrarily picked January 27th, which is a Thursday, for our first confirmation hearing. And I'd like to hear the opinion of the rest of the council. I had originally thought we would do every Thursday, but I think because of the urgency, maybe we should do like Thursday, Tuesday, Thursday, or what's everybody else's feelings? And the other question is, I just kind of want to engage into a general discussion of the confirmation process, and maybe people who have been on other councils or have been engaged in this. I think that we obviously need a public discussion, and I would think it'd be best to do the public discussion first, so people came in and had some public comment, and then we would have an opportunity to ask the nominee if a person came in and brought up a particular issue, we could then follow up on those. So we have to set up a procedure, an agenda, and the hearing dates, and kind of anticipate, how long they would go.
Madam Chairperson, my point of view would be that in order to keep this straight, because we've got so many things going on at the same time, that the confirmation hearing should be held at the same time on a particular day,
Thursday at 10?
whenever that may be.
Okay.
And then beyond that, is 30 days going to work for us with so many confirmations coming down the pike?
Well, the statute says we only have 30 days in which to confirm.
Okay.
Now, I don't have to sign to accept any more confirmations. I could do that. I mean, I only have 3. We only have 3 in the offing right now. And I don't know how quickly the executive's going to get to other people.
Well, I would just finishing up, excuse me, that there may be some confirmations. For instance, there are some people who are already holding the positions that they've been appointed to by the executive. We've got confirmation hearings for the sheriff set up or expected, so that's not what I'm talking about. But we may need to be flexible in terms of who it is that we're confirming on any given Thursday, depending on how quickly that person needs to be put in place.
So you're suggesting we do the public works person ahead of the clerk?
As an example, yes.
Mr. Miller?
Madam President and my colleagues, first, I would suggest we cannot have more than one person heard for confirmation at a particular meeting. It may make it last for fairly long, but if we want to have 2 come in at a particular day, I think we could certainly do that. The other thing I would say is, as far as public comment at these confirmation hearings, the rules suggest that every committee meeting should have public comment, but it's up to the chair of the committee to organize exactly how that's structured. And in this case, I think your suggestion of having the public comment at the beginning of the meeting so that we could then follow up with the nominees if needed to follow up on the public comment certainly makes sense.
Madam President, the item as far as how long something like this would take is going to be fluid depending on what questions come up and where the dialogue goes. So I don't know that you can assume that you're going to end just because you start that day. It could have a carryover to another day, but it seems to me a session would last, my thoughts would be a 2.5 to 3 hours maximum of that a witness would sit there and be prepared to answer questions in that respect. And then if we were to do that, to follow on colleague Miller's comments, that you could do 2 perhaps in one day, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. If it needs to have a continuation, it does get continued to another time, but that individual would only be asked to sit in testimony for no more than 3 hours at one point in time, would be my suggestion.
Madam President, looking at the calendar, we only have 2 meetings between now and when the 30 days expires. We have a meeting next Tuesday and then on February 8th. If we were to spread these out over 3 Thursdays starting on the 27th, where's my calendar? We very well may have to have a special meeting on the 15th just to vote on the confirmations. Because otherwise, if we do 1 per day, we may not finish before the 30 days expires.
So we could do like Thursday morning, Tuesday morning, and Thursday morning?
Well, it looks like the only meeting we have to confirm before the 18th is next Tuesday, or the 8th of February, unless we call the special meeting. And if we have 3 before us now, if we did 1 the 27th, 1 the 3rd, and 1 the 10th, then before the 30 days expires, we would have to call a special meeting on after the 10th. And if we did it on the 15th, that would be the Tuesday before the 18th.
Madam Chairperson, I believe it was painfully obvious weeks ago that we might have to have meet more than twice a month in January.
So what's the pleasure of the group? I'm willing to go with, if you want to do, Tuesdays we're going to become a very, very long day if we're going to be here for hearings in the mornings and then work sessions and then a meeting at 6 o'clock. So it becomes a very, very long day. I would rather be fresh and as opposed to Mr. Miller, I would rather do each one on a day because, it gives us an opportunity to get our background and study on that particular subject. But that's me. I'm up, I'll go along with whatever everyone else says.
Madam President, I don't think it's a bad idea to have that special meeting on February 15th to give us some latitude and make sure that we get everybody in sufficient time. So I don't have a special meeting on Tuesday, February 15th.
Right, Madam Chair, we're going to be here anyhow in work session, so we would just convene a special meeting of council for the singular purpose of confirming the 3 appointees as an example. And then that meeting would end and we go right into our work session, or the work session that's after the work session. But that might be, we're going to be here anyhow. We might as well stagger the agenda in that fashion.
Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Germain, have you had experience with these confirmation hearings in your experience in council?
Madam Chair, we're going to be getting resumes. In many of these cases, these are going to be well-known folks. Some may not be well-known. But as long as we have sufficient time to get the resumes and references, I don't think that most of these appointments are going to take 2 or 3 hours. I'm thinking in terms of something much more condensed, because there's a certain amount of homework that you can do, prior to the actual appearance.
I will reiterate what I said the last meeting. I've already told the executive that everyone who has a statutory or a charter requirement, like license to practice law or physician, that we have a certified copy of whatever documentation that they need before us. I think we've already gotten that packet from the sheriff. There's, I don't think, like 15 items that require in the statute, background checks and fingerprints and a number of things. So each one of those, we need those. We need certified copies. To make sure that the person meets those statutory or charter qualifications. But I'm inclined to think that we would need more, like 2 to 3 hours. I don't know about anybody else.
Madam Chair, my experience has been that if we had 3 hours, I think that would be sufficient. If we had all the information in front of us, we have enough time to do our own homework. And I would imagine that the questions brought forward would be pretty direct, and the answers, I would assume that if we got the answers that we needed, that we'd be able to get through each individual within 2 to 3 hours. So if time is our enemy here, I would suggest 2 on the Thursday, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, 1 on Tuesday, and then we would have an opportunity to digest all that information and then move on all the appointments in a reasonable manner. Without a special meeting, although we could set that if indeed we need it.
Well, if we're going to do 2 on Thursday, then we could just adjourn, go back to the following Thursday. We wouldn't have to do Tuesday.
Correct.
How's that? Yes.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would agree. And the concept of the 2 to 3 hours was not necessarily to find air in the level of a vessel that it fills the vessel. If we only need an hour because of the needs, then all it takes is an hour. Because looking at from a distance, there looks like some really terrific candidates their names are coming forward, and I would agree that there's going to be a lot of airing, and I'm sure the media is going to do their share of airing also even before we even get into the meeting. So I think that the idea of 3 hours was more to allocate the time than it was necessarily to consume the amount of time.
You want to do 22 on the 27th? We can do morning, say 10 and 1?
9 and 9.
It's up to council. 9 and 1?
Madam Chair, we're doing.
Yes.
Okay. And which 2 are those going to be?
We already told the Sheriff, the 27th, and I'm not sure, which is the second one that came in? Was it first or the other one?
I think it was clerk first.
Okay, then we'll do the clerk, and because those people have already been in office, so we could do the 2 on the 27th, and then what's the following Thursday, the 4th or something like that?
Third.
The 3rd at 9. And then if someone else comes in the meantime, we could do that afternoon. How's that?
Madam Chairman, the 27th, so I had on my calendar at 10 a.m. That's fine to move it to 9, but have we notified the sheriff of a time?
Well, yeah, we just decided 5 minutes ago. Yeah.
Oh, so he does not know about 10 o'clock. I did said 10 o'clock for some reason, so it's
I had just kind of picked 10 o'clock out of the air, but I don't think it'd be a problem for him to come in an hour earlier. All right, so we're set for those 2 Thursdays, and if we get somebody else in the meantime, we can do that Thursday afternoon for the 4th person. Okay, and any discussion about the procedure? We'll have allow, say, half an hour or so for public comment, and then we'll just allow each council person, allow the person to make a presentation, and then allow for questioning from each council member. How does that sound?
Madam Chair, may I make a suggestion? First, I have a question. The second meeting on the 27th, what time of day was that one?
1 o'clock?
1 o'clock. And then on the following Tuesday, was that going to be at 9?
No, we're going to skip Tuesday.
I'm sorry, Thursday. Was that going to be at 9
yeah,
a.m.?
Right.
Let me make a suggestion, and that Councilmember Miller and I, as part of on the Rules Committee, come up with a proposal for procedures for how to proceed with these hearings. And we'll bring it before council, and we could adopt it as a rule. I'm volunteering him and me, so I'm assuming that's okay. Councilmember Miller?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great.
Right.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Madam President?
Adopt this procedure, and then we'll see how it works. And if it doesn't work, we'll change it. And then before we cast it in stone as a rule, but that sounds good.
The second Thursday, February 3rd? Okay.
Anything else on confirmations? And then we assume that, and then I talked to the Mr. Ivory. Once we make that confirmation, I assume we need to sign some kind of an official document to make it an official part of the record. I'm used to signing journal entries, but we probably need to sign something that almost is the nature of an ordinance, a resolution, whichever, to officially make that confirmation. Would you have an opinion, Mr. Morales?
I think you would just doesn't call for an ordinance or a resolution. Actually, it just calls for a confirmation.
Yeah, but we need to do something to document the confirmation for the record.
Madam President, under the rules, that would be a motion of council, which is a formal action of the council, but it's not something that has legislative effect and is not required to be approved by the executive, so that would fit.
Yeah, I was just saying that we need something, that this is the written document to show that they were appointed at a certain date.
Madam President, if I may, what I have done with the several other motions that the council has approved and gave it an official motion number and draw up a document for your signature and the clerk's signature so that it becomes an official part of your journal.
Madam President, can you repeat the name of the person being confirmed again on the 3rd?
I might have to get the correct spelling from Mr. Nanny. We'll come up and bring you the... we just got those this morning, and we'll either be making copies or scanning them into a document, so you'll have them by tomorrow morning.
The recommended candidate's name is Bonita G. Tewin, and the last name is spelled T-E-E-U-W-E-N. Bonita, yes.
Madam Chair, are these the only 3 people that are, okay.
Those are the only 3 that I've gotten thus far. Okay, anything else on confirmations? You want to move forward on to interim appointments? I was concerned, and I put this on the agenda because I'd kind of like to get the feeling of the body on this. The executive has made a number of interim appointments. The charter sets forth a confirmation process, and theoretically, the executive could skirt our confirmation process by continually appointing interim folks to these positions. So my feeling is at some point after, say, 45 days or 60 days or somewhere, that if a person was continuing to act as interim, that at least the person would be presented to the council. Does anybody else have any feeling on that? Ms. Simon?
I tend to agree that I'm thinking maybe 60 days to come before us to see what, before council. Yes.
Mr. Tron?
Yeah, Madam President, I think that perhaps the rationale that we were looking for is why is the person still in an interim status, and perhaps the rationale coming from the executive would present a case that says, I'm looking for a national search, I have not found the right candidate, this person is still in interim status, is not the permanent candidate, and have the county executive or representative say why that person is still in interim status, because it could be for a lot of valid reasons that the person really is not somebody that you still want to go through a confirmation hearing process for, because they maybe are never the intended candidate from the executive, but there could be very valid reasons why that their candidate is not stepped forward.
Madam President, despite the reason why they're still there, I still think council should have an opportunity to ask them questions and at least have them come before us as a matter of course. And I don't think the executive is going to object to that. I thought he even indicated that.
Mr. Miller, or Mr. Greenspan, I don't want to put you in more rules, but do you think we need a rule on that, or just we don't need to? It's probably not that pressing. We have to deal with that.
I'm not sure, Madam President, that we have the authority to make a rule, because that's a charter. It's really a charter provision. But I think we would have the authority at the end of 60 days to request that through the executive's office that interim director come before us and just explain their philosophy, their mission. I wouldn't perceive it being a full confirmation hearing, but at least have an opportunity for them to explain what they're doing. I mean, I think we have a right to know what they're doing, either that person or the executive themselves.
Why don't we ask Mr. Ivory that we just be apprised of interim appointments and the dates of those interim appointments, so that we can, put it on a calendar that we can start looking after, say, 45 days or so. And I agree with Mr. Schrein. It's kind of just an explanation of why the person is there.
Madam President, I think I would be looking for more than an explanation why they're there. I would agree with Councilman Greenspan that I would want to see what they're doing with regard to their particular department and get an update on what they're doing, more than an explanation why they're still there.
Madam Chair, and I agree with Sonny. We should give them at least 60 days.
All right, so Mr. Ivory, you make sure that you start giving us lists of them, and we'll, it's somewhere 60 days, 55 days or so, we'll be starting to ask you, inquiring about that person's appointment. And it may be so that, we get an explanation and we don't even have to bring it before council. They come and say, well, this person's only going to be acting another 3 or 4 days or whatever. So we just need to be apprised of the situation. All right, anything else on the interim appointments?
Only, Madam Chairperson, that not on the interim appointments, but just because of the way the discussion has proceeded, we can at any time have a director or a cabinet member be asked to come before us to explain what's going on in their department and where they're at. And so we're not hemmed in by any time prohibited.
Yes.
Madam President, I think that we need to be conscious that that there is some sensitivity when you go forth on these nationwide searches, and I believe that the county executive is looking for some candidates on a nationwide search, and so there's a sensitivity about bringing those items up because they currently could be employed someplace. They're being brought in on for interviews and things of that nature, and so we have to be a little careful about when if we put too much pressure to get that decision made while they're in the negotiating stages of that personnel decision as far as finding the right candidate, bring him in, doing the interviews, things of that nature.
Okay, think further on that point? All right, I had asked that we put on item 5, looking at the charter, section 603, other boards and commission. Any board or commission of the county and any joint board or commission in which the county is a participant that is in existence when this charter becomes effective, but not provided for in this charter, shall continue to exist until reorganized or discontinued by action of council unless its continuance is required by law or by general law. And I think this is going to put a burden task on the council that we need to do this to me mandates that we do a review of all these existing boards and commissions. And I believe I asked Joanne Gross or somebody, or maybe I didn't, that at least we should start out with a list of, or maybe Mr. Ivory can give it to us, a list of all of the boards and commissions that exist. And then I really throw this out for the thought of everybody on the council, how we should go about reviewing some of these, all of these boards and commissions to determine. Seems to me this gives us the authority to determine which ones of these are going to, continue to exist. Mr. Miller, do you have any comment?
Madam President, I would think that it would be under the prerogative of the President of Council to refer this matter to one of the 10 standing committees or to create an ad hoc committee for this purpose, whichever you would prefer.
We have a committee on boards and commissions, and we could refer to that committee or we could do an ad hoc committee. I believe that's Ms. Conwell's committee. No, I think isn't there one that has boards and appointments? Isn't one of the committee that has boards?
Yes, that is me.
Yeah. So, if you want to undertake that, or think about having an ad hoc committee, we don't have to decide this today. Maybe we should get the list of how many there are, and.
Yeah, if Bob can get me the list of all the boards. Who's on that committee with me? Julian's not here. Mike, you're good? Okay.
Okay, any other thoughts on that? Okay, I know there's a lot of... Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
I'm just wondering that, the executive is really going to have all of his major department heads, and they're actually going to be evaluating reorganizing county government, streamlining. I'm just wondering if we should be getting recommendations from the executive and those department heads on maybe some consolidation of these boards and commissions. Because without doing it that way, we don't know what direction. Here we might be working independently, and they may have a different idea of consolidation and streamlining or expanding. So I think for something like this, we probably need input, from the executive.
I can call him tomorrow. That is a good point, Chuck. To see where he's going with the ideas of the boards and commissions, to see if he wants to make them smaller. So I can. Is he busy tomorrow, Bob?
I think this is pretty much a long-range project. This is probably a 6 to 8 month project. So, it's not something we have to, do today, but I just kind of wanted to bring it up so we can get started.
President? I don't think it's a bad idea that council, independent of the executive, begins its own process to determine who sits on those boards, what are their qualifications, what is the function of that board. So when and if we have to or will contend with what consolidations are going to occur, that we're fully informed about the functionality and the personality and qualifications of those who serve currently. So I think it's a good idea for us to start this process, whether it's one board at a time through my colleagues' committee, and just start that. And it's right, it's going to be a longer range project, but let's get going with it, I think.
I couldn't agree more, because I know some of these boards have fairly bad attendance records. So, and I think we had talked about before that if you're going to be on a board, you got to should have an attendance record. If you're not going to show up, then we'll appoint somebody else. And there's just a lot of work, and it's a very long range process. All right, any other comments on that?
Madam President, if I may interject,
Yes.
right before we came into the meeting, I received a phone call from the Treasurer's Office, Robin Darden Thomas. She was inquiring about the Investment Advisory Committee, which is a body that's required under the Ohio Revised Code to meet quarterly. Their next meeting should be January 27th, I think she said, and it was always in conjunction with Board of Commissioner meetings at the time. And I directed her, because we don't know who is going to be seated on that particular committee, that I directed her to work with the law director, and then I wanted to get with you to see if there was any other direction or suggestions that, either I can let her or someone else could give her a call, let her know. But she was pretty adamant that, this is something that needs to occur fairly soon, since they are mandated to meet quarterly.
Well, I appointed committees this morning, and Mr. Miller is going to be chairman of the Finance and Budget Committee, so it looks like to me Mr. Miller is it.
I believe she indicated that the council will probably have 2 appointments, but they're unsure as to the treasurer has to be an appointment, the clerk of courts has to be an appointment, the county executive an appointment, and then I believe 2 appointments would come from the council. That's what she thinks anyway, so we're not sure exactly who needs to be appointed. So it just needs to be looked into further. But she seemed to want to expedite and figure out what's going on so they can schedule a meeting.
Well, does anybody have any problem with Mr. Miller, chairman of the Finance Committee, that he be the designee?
No, Madam Chairman, I actually think that would be a good process to have the chairman of the committees within council to serve on any liaison committees of the county, as we did with Mr. Schron and the Economic Development Commission.
Mr. Miller, who's your vice chair? I don't even remember. Do we want to start with Miller and Gallagher, to start with, and that'll get us for the first meeting? I think that sounds good to me. Anybody have any objection to that?
Other than Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Miller, that's right.
Okay.
Madam Chair, just to be clear, the question just came up. I believe this is the council president's appointment versus a council vote to appoint, correct? Thereby giving you the authority, as you just did, to appoint the chairman and vice chairman of the Finance Committee to be the liaison to the Investment Committee.
Yeah, let's do that for now. I think that's the most workable thing for now. Anybody else have any suggestions? Do you have a suggestion?
Sure. We're talking about investments for Cuyahoga County. We're talking big dollars. We should have professionals. If they're going to be giving advice on big dollars, they should be very up to date on what's happening in financial institutions and so on and so forth. So, I mean, we're if they're meeting quarterly, I mean, they are meeting with some serious implications. So, I'm just wondering who's on the Investment Advisory Committee now, and if we can determine that they're qualified until have them continue to serve until we would replace them.
Well, that was my thinking. This would just be until we have a meeting coming up. This would be for the first meeting until we could study it and come up with, decide if there was any other person. Would that be acceptable to you?
Well, my point is, this Investment Advisory Committee is actually, I don't know what sums of money they're going to be dealing with, but as far as investing at any one time, but it's got to be in the multi-million-dollar arena, and we definitely need professionals to be giving that type of advice.
Madam President?
Yep, Madam President, I agree with my colleague that we need to find out what level of expertise, because my assumption is we're looking at millions of dollars that will be invested on that very day. It's not, this is not one you're going to get up to speed on. You're going to make a decision that day to determine to invest millions of dollars worth of the county's funds on that day, whether it go for a 30-day window, a 60-day window, 90-day window, or whatever length of time. I think we perhaps need to get up to speed on that piece of information. What do they have to be prepared? And I actually thought, Madam Clerk, that I thought when we were in our work session that they specifically had this meeting for the quarterly meeting, and that it was decided that by doing it at that time, it gave us a little bit bigger window that we weren't going to get forced into having to do this in January. I thought we had a little bit longer window before we had to do this. I thought they made that investment advisory meeting while we were in session, during our work sessions, that period of time. They told us that they had conducted that last quarterly investment, and so I would have thought we would have had longer than just January. Would have thought we would have had till February or later.
I believe it was in October, the last one, so they would then have January 25th. But the makeup of the Investment Advisory Committee has always been the 3 commissioners, the county treasurer, and the clerk of courts. And then they've always had staff there with Office of Budget and Management, for guidance, and as well as PFM, which is the county's consultant for these matters. And also from the Treasurer's Office, Mr. Terry Malterich, who has worked with the Advisory Committee on all of these issues.
Mr. Nanny?
Yes. I just wanted to point out that we have informed the Executive Office of this issue. So one of the things I'd like to do is maybe take some time and talk with David Merriman, who we've talked to in the past on this, just to see if they've come up with anything. This was an issue that we presented to the prosecutor's office as well, to give some advice relative to who should serve on the Investment Advisory Committee.
So the question is whether or not we can appoint one of our members, or we should appoint someone from the outside.
Yes, and what I wanted to say is that at Summit County, the Investment Advisory Board consists of the county executive, the president of council, and the fiscal officer. That's just another model that we could look at. So if you'd like, I can, I like the idea of having the committee work on this, but I could work with Dale and kind of tell him the work that we've done already and maybe come up with a recommendation. And
Mr. Miller is quite skilled in
Yes.
budget and finance from his
Right.
experience in legislature.
so I can
And also
share
Mr.
the
Gallagher, in
additional
terms of
information.
president of council in Strongsville. I mean, he's had a lot of background in finance. Yeah, 10 years in finance.
So, Madam President, if I may, so the question is, does council appoint from within itself, or can we appoint a designee? Is that the question?
I think the issue, this is one area where I do not believe that the charter provides any information on. So,
If we were to appoint
Right.
someone from the outside, I don't know, do we have means to pay the person, or per diem, or
no,
compensation?
I don't think it'd be a situation like that.
Pardon me?
I don't believe that it would be a paid type situation. It's my personal opinion, but again, there's nothing in the charter that addresses this. So maybe we could.
I would have to review the relevant provisions of the revised code so that I could competently advise you, and I will do that promptly.
I can give you the information that we've dug up as well through the transition process.
Okay, so do we need to address this again then at the meeting of this coming Tuesday, or do we have time?
I don't know, she just seemed that.
When is the
seemed
meeting, the
expedient.
25th? Everything's happening on the 25th.
Well, it was currently scheduled for the 27th, the Thursday, the 27th.
That's same day as our
And-
confirmation hearing.
Right, and I also indicated to Robin that she should also be getting with the executive's office to see what guidance is coming from that end as well. So that's all I know about it.
I will review the statute and confer with the representatives, the appropriate representatives of the county executive, and report back to you promptly.
Right.
I don't recall in our conversations with the treasurer's office that there was a mandate for it to be on a specific date. It's important to note because I would have had that.
No, just
in my
quarterly.
notes. Right.
Yes, Mr. Miller.
We should find out whether you, as president of the council have the authority to make these appointments or whether we need to pass a motion of council at our next meeting.
All right, well, then Mr. Morales will follow up on that. But I think either way, that if we have a meeting coming up, I think that, the two, that you and Mr. Gallagher, since chairman and vice chairman of the finance committee, would certainly be appropriate until we determine if we should take up Mr. Germana's suggestion.
Madam President, one other thing, as a motion of council for a meeting on the 25th, since these work sessions, no decisions can be made, I would make a suggestion that we have a motion on the 25th agenda for the confirmation hearings, just to formally set them. And I've already made reference to the clerk to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Madam President, I'm sorry if I may call the roll for Mr. Rogers. Thank you.
All right, I think we can move down to miscellaneous business, and Jean has wants to lay out the format for setting the agenda so it's clear to everyone, and there are some time constraints involved in this, so it's important that we have this discussion.
We had a meeting the other day with the David Merriman and Bob Ivory, and we discussed some guidelines that we would utilize in order to make sure that we were all on the same page as far as the schedule for the meetings. And so what we have determined was this, that anytime you add more time at the end of the end, say for instance, if you wanted all of your information about contracts a week before the meeting, then and since there's a 3-week lead time already, then that would mean there would be 4 weeks lead time for the departments in order to get everything to you. And, so that we would have it that week before. But since by council rule, I submit to you your agenda on Friday for the following Tuesday's meeting, we basically determined that if the county executive approved any items that he wants to have on the council's agenda by close of business on Wednesdays, I could do up the agenda on Thursdays and then get it out with all the documentation, backup material, et cetera, to all the council members on Friday morning, and that's the goal. And then we were also discussing, well, what if persons didn't, hear about a particular item or whatever? It's kind of like the agenda keeps on going and the contracts keep on coming. And so because of the nature of the process, you might want to consider that once you get the agenda, that if there's something on the agenda, that we come up with a process for either placing those items under review or by a majority of council members placing an item under review if you're not comfortable with considering it at that meeting or what have you. But it just seems that once the process is done to make sure that all the contracts comply with all the county policies have been signed off by the budget management, the auditor, the prosecutor, or the law director, and that the legislation is completed, that, all of that takes time. And so, once that happens, the executive says, okay, this can go on the council's agenda, and then that would be the Wednesday before the meeting, and I put together the agenda on Thursday and then distributed it on Friday morning. So I kind of wanted to bring that process to all of you to see what you thought of that, or if you have ideas to do it differently. But the process for doing contract items is very intense, and when you have hundreds, because not only are they doing the council's agenda contracts, they're also doing the executive, the staff is also working on the executive's contracts that have to be, processed and approved and signed off on, et cetera. And so with, 3,500 resolutions that went out during 2009, and 2,000 of those were contracts, I can't stress enough how, these contracts just keep on coming from the departments. And so, I wanted to be able to give you a recommendation for a process that would be at least reasonable for all parties concerned.
Mr. Miller.
We're in an interim process that hopefully is only going to last 90 days, and I certainly think and hope that it's not going to be our long-term intention that contracts are going to be regularly passed under first reading suspension. I think hopefully once we get past the 90 days, we're going to get into a process where the lion's share of the contracts would go to a board of control and would be approved there, and a relatively small number of the largest contracts would be introduced into council, and then they would be referred to committee where they could be studied in a little bit of detail, and then hopefully 2 weeks later at the next council meeting they'd come back and be approved.
Yeah, my question was, where in the process are we going to, when we look at the agenda, should people be picking off items for their committees?
Madam Chairperson, I think the discussion does go to the whole way that we determine how we're going to route legislation through committees, and I don't have an answer to that. I don't see models anywhere, in Congress it could take, a year to do something. In the legislature it could take months and months to do something. I don't see a model yet that fits the need for the county to continue its business. A board of control may help that out quite a bit. I don't have a problem at all. In fact, I understand exactly what the clerk is suggesting that we do, but I think it is in the short run or in the short term, and we're going to end up in a sort of a backward kind of a process, which may be necessary at first, where if we're not comfortable with something, then it's sent to committee, rather than something coming from committee to the council. But this is really going to take some time for us over the next few months, I think, to have a sense of what the rhythm of the county's business is and how the committees fit in. What is the role of a council committee compared to a legislative committee and some other kind of a body? I view it more as a sort of an oversight, macro kind of oversight role rather than an ordinance by ordinance role. There, in many other legislative bodies, there are many, many members. There's only 11 of us. There's 99 people in the Ohio House of Representatives. So there's a lot more going on. 6 or 7 or 8 meetings taking place the same day in 8 different rooms. So my point is that I think we're going to have to work through this for several weeks, if not several months, to determine what the rhythm is for the county's business, so that we don't hold things up, and yet we do our due diligence in terms of oversight as we move along.
Do we have any idea how many items are going to be on the agenda for Tuesday? Next
I do
Tuesday?
not.
Anybody have any idea?
I basically gave a quick glance at the agenda, but it didn't look like anything was actually in its final stages because it didn't have legislation attached to it. So,
yeah, I haven't been presented with items to prepare legislation.
Mr. Miller?
In every legislative process that I've seen, it's the prerogative of the president of council or the top leading person to refer the legislation to committee at his or her discretion. I think that falls in your prerogative, although we are going to have some process in this council where we decide which items are we content with, that we're willing to pass them under suspension, and which items need to be sent to committee. We're going to need to have some way that we as a council decide that. But once it's decided that something's going to go to committee, I think you as the president of council are the traffic cop to route them to committee.
I agree with Mr. Brady and Mr. Miller that this is going to be a learning process, and perhaps that's one of the ways which we can use our work sessions afterwards to say, okay, where could we have used the committee system at last week's meeting, because some things are going to go on an expedited path only because of the timing, these 2 or 3 months as we get the learning experience. But I think the learning, we need to capture those learning moments and those teaching moments and say, okay, this is where we could have done this. Here's how it could have gone committee. Here's an opportunity. What committee would it have gone to on our semi-monthly meetings of our work sessions? Because I think this is the purpose of the work session, to actually capture the teaching points as we go forward. Because we're writing the book right now. The book doesn't exist, and I think it's a great opportunity to still get the speed to which we need, but actually, as Mr. Brady said, let's capture those moments so we can see where should it have gone. Maybe it could have been an appointment, but if we appoint it today, is it going to have an effect on this county if we wait 3 or 4 weeks before we get through that process? And maybe it does have to have a suspension of rules while we go through this 2 or 3 months.
Well, I anticipated meeting with Jean Thursday-ish in the afternoon, because she said she
Yes.
gets it she'll get it first thing in the morning, so it's going to take her some time. So maybe Ms. Simon and whoever else is around on Thursday afternoon, we can go through the process with her. To kind of be the gatekeeper and figure out which way we're going and how many we have and all that kind of stuff. Since we sort of establish a principle.
Yeah, Madam President, thank you. I would hope, and I relay this to Mr. Ivory, that the items that were pulled off last week's agenda would at least have an opportunity to be placed on the agenda this week. If not, I would like an explanation as to why those items will not be placed on the agenda. And then if they're not, what the time frame is for us to hear those items.
Yeah, and the other question is we have to determine when we go through the agenda what persons that we need, either for the work study session before or at the council meeting, what staff or persons that we need for explanation. Our 2 council presidents here have any other comments?
Madam Chair, question to Jean about the practice under the county commissioner system. The contracts, there wasn't any three readings for county commissioners.
No. There was no requirement for 3 readings.
So, Madam Chair, once we have, if these contracts are going to go out through this whole process and qualified, so on, so forth, and then they don't come to council when it's already done. They should be introduced even before they know who the contract is to go to, so that we could be in at the beginning. And then by the 3rd reading, we would be able to have the approval because everything went through the whole process. So, what I'm saying is we don't want to wait to have something presented to council where they've gone through the whole process of bidding, so on, qualifying, hashing it out, legal. Because then automatically, if we're going to have 3 readings, we're going to be delaying things over a month. I think if you follow what I'm saying, as these contracts are going to be rolled out, they get introduced with blank, and then we can be, in subsequent meetings as we get more information, bids are received and bids are done. Then we could go to a final reading when everything is all nip and tuck.
I believe that we might have a suggestion for that. I think what you're referring to is if a department goes out for bids or requests for proposals, then they bring back the recommendation of award to the council, and that way you have input before a contract is actually put together the vendor is notified and, all the dollar amount and everything already determined. So if they brought back the recommendation of award to you, in the past, what the departments had to do was ask the commissioners if they can, number one, the first step was to go out for bid or seek proposals, which, I don't know if that's, what the council wants to get into, and I think we're trying to determine that. Then the second step would be, once you've gone out for requests for proposals or bids, then you would come back and ask for a recommendation of award to a certain contractor for, certain time period, certain dollar amount. And then the third step, once that award recommendation was made and they got approval for that, all they had to do was then put together the contract, because they already had approval for the amount, the time period, the service, and the vendor, and then that contract would then be processed and then just signed off by the county administrator at that point. They didn't have to bring it back before the board in order to get that approved. So I think what we're wrestling with at this point is what does the council want to see? Do you want them to come back when they're actually, going out for the bids or the RFP? With bids, they can tell you it's going to be an estimated cost. With requests for proposals, there's not really an estimated cost. There is an internal one, but there's not something that you can actually vet out in public what the estimated cost will be. So I'm not sure, except for the service that they might be providing and the length of time, that might be something that you want to consider. We might be better off, at the department level, and then when they're ready to recommend an award. But I couldn't see the process coming before you at the final contract stage, because that would be, kind of ridiculous. They would have already told the vendor, you got the award, this is the dollar amount, here's the contract, sign it, and, and then you're saying, well, wait a minute, no, yeah. So, exactly.
I think that this would be a perfect item for the procurement committee to work on, in coordination with the executive's office, because we need to be really on the same page with them also, so we're not conflicting with the processes that they've want to move on. So I would recommend that we kind of put that on the procurement committee's agenda to-do list right away.
Madam President?
Yes.
I think this actually falls more closely in the Public Works and Contracting Committee.
Makes sense to, yes.
No, I think I mistyped it.
Procurement should be under the Public Works.
It's on there twice, procurement. So we decided that we're going to take it off of Human Resources and just keep it with Public Works.
Yes.
Right, that's
yes.
right. That's Mr. Jones.
That's correct.
Okay, so that will be a work in progress. Any other miscellaneous business, Mr. Greenspan?
Well, Madam Chair, if I'm correct here, then you just assigned that task to the procurement committee, correct?
Yeah, you think it should be rules?
No.
Oh,
No.
okay.
No.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I do have one more item, and we briefly touched on this. Under charter review, we are mandated, I'm talking now about redistricting, there's a mandate in the charter that we have 120 days. We have to appoint a committee of 5 persons to handle redistricting. The reason this becomes time sensitive, and we need to understand better the deadline from the state, is because we're going to have people who are going to begin to file the paperwork for running in the March primary, which involves the even districts of this council. So a year from March, they're going to have to file the paperwork. The first week. So we need to kind of be aggressive as we start to approach this redistricting. I believe that the State House has to have their maps done by April 15th. And if that's the case, we're looking at the 120-day mark, pretty close to where we are right now, to get our maps drawn, or at least formulate this committee. But we're somewhat hamstrung, and Councilmember Brady and I talked about this, because we're not exactly sure when the data will be released from the Census Department, U.S. Bureau of Census, in order to come up with the maps. But I just want to put this on the radar screen. I'm not necessarily asking for action at the meeting next week, but we need to start thinking about the redistricting process as it relates to county council.
Mr. Brady?
just wanted to add that my experience has been that it's the data that's not available until in the spring. I've seen maps drawn in the fall. I've seen maps drawn earlier in the year. I'm not sure, what the guidelines exactly are, but certainly I think that Councilman Greenspan is correct that because of the early primary next year and a filing deadline that's less than a year away, that this is yet another task that we have to take on. I must say that this has never been taken on in a public forum. Redistricting is the most politically sensitive item that any political body ever deals with. On the other hand, we're in a whole different situation here, so it should be yet another unique experience.
And further to that, the challenge with the redistricting board, we're not on it. It's 3 members from one party and 2 members from another party, independent of council. So this goes through another selection process. The council has to appoint the members to serve on this redistricting board. And it's not specific to who of which party is the 3 and who's of the 2. It's just outlined in the charter that way.
That would be the way that the situation is handled on paper. That would not be the way the situation has ever been handled in reality.
Where this gets even more complicated is because of these staggered terms. You're talking about redistricting, say, the even coming up. If there's going to be change in territory, it's going to be coming from the odds that are right next door to the evens, and it's midterm for the odd. So we've really got to think this one through of exactly how you redistrict somebody when you have a sitting person. Normally the redistricting happens for the next term of office, but you see what I mean?
This would be similar to the way that it's handled in the staggered terms of the state senate, in that your district lines do actually change. That is to say, those of us who have 4-year terms, our district lines will actually change during our term. There's no other situation like that, not the Congress, not obviously United States senators have a state. They don't have that kind of a problem even though they're staggered. It's in the state senate where that occurs. And to be just very blunt about it, the way the process has always been handled behind the scenes is that a process is created whereby council persons, in this case, whose districts abut each other, would sit down and talk about it, along with people who have skill in the demographics. These lines are drawn by professionals. We'll have to actually get probably a consultant to draw these lines. That's the way it's done, unless somebody else knows of another experience. A consultant is hired to draw these lines. There's a whole, industry involved in this. But I don't think we should get too upset about it, because in a county this big, there's 11 districts. These are gigantic counties. I don't imagine this will be much more than I don't expect any radical or redistricting to go on between these 11 districts. There was a lot of attention paid toward drawing these districts in the first place. We'll have to make some adjustments because of population, but I think that there's no reason that we wouldn't be able to accommodate all 11 districts in a way that would be satisfactory to the members and to the process.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, and Councilman Germain is correct. It could get very dicey when we've got some folks that might be drawn into maps with other, we might be in competing districts at some point. So, and the charter doesn't call for a provision as to how to deal with that. We might have to refer, as Councilman Brady said, to the Senate model and see how they do it when maps are redrawn at midterm. One thing, the challenge is going to be the board, as I understand it, is consisting of 5 electorates from the county of different party backgrounds. That's less of my concern. Is the concern to find, as Councilman Brady said, qualified people, 5 people within the county who have experience in drawing maps. And it's going to be, the charter doesn't leave us a whole lot of guidance, just basically as I've explained it. The other thing that we may want to consider, and I would strongly recommend, is whatever maps are drawn, that our maps, before they go to Columbus, go to the U.S. Department of Justice for vetting against the Voters and Civil Rights Acts. And that we're within our rights to request that to happen in the charter. And that way we take away any local or state party politics from the process. The committee would draw the maps. It goes to Washington for review. They vet it. They come back with revisions if there are any. Then we forward it to Columbus. We don't even, as I understand it, approve the maps that this 5-person committee draws. They draw them up and submit them to Columbus. So do we approve? Could you please? Yes.
I'm sorry, subsection 2. Immediately following each decennial federal census commencing with the census of 2000, the council shall appoint 5 electors of the county, not more than 3 of whom shall be members of the same political party, and none of whom shall hold public office or be an officer of a political party, who shall constitute a council redistricting commission. The commission shall, not later than 120 days following its appointment, prepare and certify to the Board of Elections of Cuyahoga County a detailed apportionment of the council districts in accordance with the principles provided for in this section. The county executive shall provide for the commission such facilities and assistance and as shall be required for the commission to carry out its duties as provided herein. That apportionment shall be completed by the same date as the apportionment of the Ohio General Assembly and shall be effective for the first regular county election thereafter.
So under that provision, we don't approve the maps at all.
So these people work for free too, these 5 electors. Yes.
Chair, it seemed to me it would be a good place to start would be to look at who drew the original 11 districts and the transition and ask them what their guidance was, what their background was, how they created that, what they used for their structural decisions. And then when they factor in the new census, they're going to be able to use that experience that they created the 11 with the new census data. And perhaps you're going to find, as I think Mr. Brady said, it will be probably very little change. It might be a few lines that get moved, but I'm sure that somebody put a lot of work, a lot of effort to get those numbers to work out and to divide up. And I see a head nodding from somebody who was actually on one of the transition advisory work groups out there. So I assume that they would be a good place to start. They could probably identify 3 of one party and 2 of another party also. They're coming right directly from that, because I would think that was already a blended group that came through the transition.
Mr. Rogers?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I'm understood that correctly, the county executive determines what the budget of this committee will be.
No, the county executive shall provide for the commission such facilities as assistance as shall be required for the commission to carry out its duties and provide therein. So that sounds like room space copiers. May I read it? And staff, probably.
Well, that would mean that there's some type of, this costs money to redistrict. I'm just wondering who has the authority to approve that budget and what that budget should be. That kind of determines the scale of which we need to look at this.
Well, Mr. Brady, why don't you talk about your experience hiring consultants? They would be people probably would work with the commission, right?
This charter may, like it does in many areas, break new ground. But if in terms of the General Assembly, and I'd ask my colleague who also served there, I think traditionally October is when the lines for the congressional and state legislative districts are published, made known to the public. I specifically remember 10 years ago when that was early in October. So I would assume that would be the time frame that we would be talking about of an end product. I would say that rather than discuss this for the rest of the evening, that this is, something that we might want to either put in, into somebody's box or create yet another ad hoc committee of the Cuyahoga County Council, because there's obviously some areas to explore here, like how it would be financed, about these board members, how we're going to choose them apparently. But every redistricting that I've ever heard of certainly has expert consultants who have a background in redistricting and demographics and all these things. As the, it's not, citizens don't just do this. They may sit on a board and okay it, but I mean, you have to find people with the expertise to do this.
Well, Madam President, this may be, as I mentioned, I would strongly urge that whatever maps are drawn be vetted through the Department of Justice. Maybe a starting point would be they provide the guidance to this 5-person committee. That may be a starting point.
Anything further on that? So that's one of those things that we have to put on our long-range agenda. Mr. Miller?
I would say as a timeline, since our filing deadline for our elections is going to be in the first week of January next year, that we would have to publishing the redistricting plan at least a quarter ahead of time to give everybody a fair chance to respond to the districts and run if they choose to. So that would be October 1. And if the plan is to be done on October 1, then by June 1, we would need to appoint that commission so that they would have 120 days, as is specified in the charter, to do their work. So I think that gives us some kind of deadline as to when we have to get this commission up and appointed by.
So a year from now, we really should have our plans pretty solid.
Madam President, it's much sooner than that. The commission would have to be in place by June 1 of this year so that they can finish a redistricting plan by October 1 of this year, which would be just over 90 days before the filing deadline for next year's elections, which is in the first week of January because of the March primary.
Madam President, the charter says immediately following each 10-year federal census, beginning with 2010. I don't know what that means. Does that mean that immediately after the release of the census data necessary to compile? I think that's probably what the intent is. It says immediately following each census.
Yeah, I think we have to consult some professional. I think I actually know. Wasn't Mr. Brisker from Tri-C involved in drawing the lines?
Yeah.
Well, no,
yeah. I thought he was doing it as a public service.
My only point was when do we have to? Maybe Mr. Morales can shed some guidance. Not today, but after he gets with the rules stuff, he's going to.
I can give you my opinion. The charter is not clear on it, but as a practical matter, you need the data. Right?
Correct. So with the point, I know that the State House has to have their maps done by April 15th. Done. So I don't know what census data they're working on, but they're going to have to be working on some of the same data we would be working under. So with that being said, maybe we need to get clarity as to the date the data is available. Then it looks like we have to appoint this committee immediately.
But I would suggest that the time frame that Mr. Miller put forth would probably be the latest time frame that you would want to.
Okay, so we need to start on this immediately. So we all need to start thinking about some way of selecting 5 electors. We don't have to do that today, but we need to keep in mind how we're going to go about selecting 5 electors, from the county, and then the mechanics of it. Right.
May we find out who actually participated in the transition committee, so we can get? I assume there's like any of these other transition committees, there had to be a group of folks that participated in this, and having seen all the hard work of a lot of those 1,000 folks, I think that'd be a nice place to at least consider starting for those 5 public pieces, not the professional that you're talking about, Dan.
Madam Chair, I don't think it's transition. I think it's the originators. It's the originators. The transition.
Okay. And for what? And Madam President, not to beat this dead horse, one further comment. Most of our districts were drawn close to almost state house districts. So we may have the leg up of having that because, as I understand it, there will only be 11 house districts in Cuyahoga County, not 12 based on the census. So a lot of the framework may already be compiled by how the state house maps are drawn.
Mayor, did you want to add something from formerly of the transition team? Yes, you can come to the microphone. Give us your name.
Linda Mayer. Code of Ethics Work Group Chair. I do know that in the framing of the charter, that was a big issue among the people that were drafting the final versions of the charter. And they got the same redistricting consultant that had just the previous year, redrawn the new districts for Cleveland City Council. They got the same person who did that to make these provisional ones for the county charter. So if you can find out who that consultant was, you've got the name. So you can also ask any of the framers of the charter who would know that too. So you could give a call to former Mayor Zanotti or somebody, and they will know the name of who did it. I also attended at one point a meeting at Cleveland State at the Levin Center where they showed on their big map up on the wall, they showed ways that you could do redistricting with computers. It's not that hard, and there even was, at the state level, there even was an amendment which got not a constitutional amendment that was proposed. It didn't make it because the parties like to do it their own way, depending on who's in charge. However, there was a proposed amendment that gave citizens groups or individuals the right to crunch the numbers and propose plans, competing plans, and then there would just be a committee that evaluates the various plans and pick the best one. So there are a number of ways you could do it.
Much. Anything else on this? Do we have any other miscellaneous business? Mr. Miller?
Madam President, I'd like to bring up another item that's just as thorny but more mundane, which is the question of how to generate regular meeting times for the various standing committees, hopefully, which mostly don't conflict with each other. And there needs to be some kind of coordinating process where times for committees can be proposed and they can be merged into a package.
I think everybody just got their assignments today, or if they haven't looked at their emails, they may not have. And let's give everybody an opportunity to look at them, talk with their members, and decide when would be convenient for their members to meet.
I don't agree with that necessarily, that we should have times for standing committees. I think it should be up to the chair of that committee to determine if and when they're going to meet, depending upon the availability of the members. It may be that something does require more consistent meeting time, finance rules for now, but I think other committees might be issue-driven, time-sensitive issues that, so I just want to just put something else out there, that I'm not sure that every committee has to have a time set on a calendar when they're going to meet.
Yes, Ms. Miller.
The concept, and it is written into our rules, is that each committee should have a slot, and it doesn't mean that a committee has to meet every time its slot comes up, but that it should normally meet at the slot designated. If you don't do that, then the situation that you create is that every committee meeting of council becomes a special meeting where additional public notice provisions kick in. the idea of having a regular committee slot time for each committee is more a matter of facilitating public participation than anything else. If each meeting of every committee is at the call of its chair, then not only going to create a lot of confusion with the public, but there's going to be an awful lot of work to be done trying to make sure that each meeting that's called doesn't create conflicts with other committee meetings, where if each committee has a slot that doesn't conflict with the other committees, well, then the chairperson knows that they can call a committee meeting in their time slot and not have it conflict with the other committees.
Madam President, I disagree. I think you're used to working with a much bigger body. We're only 11 people, and I think what's more confusing to the public is if they're expecting a meeting on Thursday at 5 o'clock and there's nothing pending with that committee and they show up and nothing is happening. I think that's more frustrating. I don't think it's that difficult to send out special meeting notices. I can speak for my city of a body of 7 that we do function in that way, and we function very well, and the public is informed by way of special meeting notices. So I think the contrary is true in this case, that people are going to expect to show up and expect to see something, and we discussed this when we were discussing the rules. So there's just going to be something this body needs to discuss. I don't think we're that big where we need to worry necessarily about overlapping in those things. I think we're small enough to function in that manner.
Madam Chairperson.
Yes, Mr. Brady.
I agree with Councilman Miller on this matter. This is a large county. 10 committees are a lot of committees. We do need time slots. I think initially because of these confirmation hearings and because there's so much activity going on, that it won't be an issue out of the gate. But in order to bring a rational kind of ability to organize our work and our personal lives, around the committees that we're going to be serving on. I think that an expectation of when those committees are going to be is what I would like to see. The calendar of the council would come out in advance. The public should not be expecting a committee unless there's a committee scheduled. And committees don't meet every week. But I think that we will be continually in conflict with each other if we don't have slots.
All right, well, we don't have to decide this tonight. We can't decide tonight. But I think it's something we have to discuss and come up. And like I said, everybody's just got their assignments. They can start thinking about their time. Mr. Germana?
Madam Chair, I see the advantages on both opinions, but the charter says this council is part-time. Now, some that are employed, how can we ever plan business trips, appointments, and if we had no idea what the pattern is going to be on meetings? I think what we've got to do is kind of work through, and so that those that are employed could make business plans beyond 1 week. Because if we don't know next week when the committee meetings are going to be, how can we transact business or plan trips, or it'd just be impossible. And in the case of Sonny Simons, an attorney, you've got a court docket and so on and so forth. And I don't know exactly how you plan around those type of things, but I think we got to develop a pattern, and then just as we advance, say when there's going to be a meeting, if there's not going to be a meeting, we could say that and put on the website that the environmental meeting for this Thursday is canceled. or that will not be held.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Kama.
Councilman Dale Miller had a while ago, and I don't know if everybody got the proposed plan for the schedule of different slots. Did everybody get that? That was a good starting point, and I took a look at it, and I had also offered my suggestions if I got some of the committees that I wanted, and I had picked some time slots. So if everyone could look at that tonight, I thought it was a good start.
Yeah, we also have a space problem, figuring out where we're going to have these particular meetings, because we don't, we have this room and we have some limited space over in the administration building. So not only is time, but also space.
Madam President, further to Councilmember Germano's point, and I agree with him, especially because of my professional schedule and the charter mandating it part-time, we can still come up with slots, and we don't have to publish that we're meeting. We don't have to say the third Tuesday of every month at 5 o'clock, X committee's meeting. Externally, only publish when we have a meeting, but internally know, if you're a member of that committee, that that's when the committee is scheduled to have its next meeting. Does that make, that may satisfy the concern here, but at least the room, the time is agreed upon, so that if an agenda item occurs, we then know that we've got a date certain, a time and a location identified and reserved.
And I also throw in we got to figure out the timing on these meetings also, because if we need staff for the meetings, they're not always available. Or, we're going to be paying overtime if we're going after 4:30. I think there's some talk that we might be talking to some of the universities and possibly get us some interns or some volunteers. But we do have to talk about overtime if we're going past 4:30. Yes, Mr. Schrein.
Yes, Madam Chair. I think the answer is going to fall someplace between all three of these solutions. I realistically believe, because there's going to come a time when we're having a hearing, and the witness might be coming, for example, in economic development, might be coming from out of state, and we're going to have to make arrangements to work within that schedule. So, as much as I would like to have a fixed time, we're going to end up having to be adjusting to the satisfaction of so it's going to be a little of both, but I think that the more we can actually have a fixed schedule, it's going to be better off for everybody. But there's absolutely no way when we start getting into some of these sensitive issues that a witness is going to be available that we want to have there for a hearing.
Okay, anything else in the miscellaneous business for the good of the order?
Madam President, as we're talking about staff and overtime, has council, this is an opportunity at least to broach the subject of our staff and how we plan to proceed with that.
Mr. Brady was chairman of our ad hoc committee.
Yes. We should be able to give you a good idea of how to proceed on that very shortly. Mr. Joe Nanny will be brought on as the chief of staff of the council, starting officially, permanently tomorrow. So that's our first actual permanent decision. I spoke to every single person on the council about that. It was informal, but I think that we all, because we worked with Mr. Nanny through over several months, felt comfortable with that particular appointment. Also, we have, of course, our clerk. And I personally, my own opinion is that we should have Mr. Nanny and the clerk work together and give us some idea of what kind of staffing they'll need to be able to do their jobs as a starting point. But certainly, we're going to need they're going to need assistance in order to do their job. You can see how shorthanded we are even on a day like today. And also, eventually we're going to need some expertise in other areas like budget.
I think we agree we need an assistant clerk. How soon will that be posted?
I spoke with the clerk earlier today, and I asked her to. I took the initiative to ask her to get with Mr. Nanny and to post that as soon as possible. Would the clerk like to respond to that?
Very excited to do that right away.
I think at our next council meeting, we would formally confirm Mr. Nanny for the appointment. I mean, we haven't voted in a public meeting.
I don't believe a vote is necessary in terms of the, I really don't believe a vote by this council is necessary for us to employ an employee. I don't believe we're going to be voting on every single employee that the council has on its staff in a roll call vote in council like we would ordinances and other issues. That's not my impression, but I'll defer to some people who are professionals in this area of human resources to give us some input on that. We want to do this appropriately, but it's not my view that we're going to have each person who's ever employed by this council be voted on like they're being confirmed to a cabinet position or something.
Madam Chair, I think this might come in the form of a salary ordinance. That's probably when we'll have an opportunity to vote in that way. I think it's through the salary, but before then, I don't think it's necessary to pass any.
We are extremely shorthanded, and I don't want to, expedite, the process beyond what is lawful. But the fact is that we've only been organized for a very short amount of time. We have absolutely no staffing. We have incredible responsibilities, laid in front of us. We need to get organized, and we need to do anything we can to make that happen. And I think that as long as we're, satisfied that we're going to try to bring in the best staff, and I'm sure you would all agree with me, the very most professional and best staff we can possibly bring in to assist us in this role. And I don't think that, we should belabor this thing to a point where we cripple ourselves even more in terms of our ability to function.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the charter does call for the ability of council to appoint staff, but it also specifically says that it must be done. All powers of the council shall be exercised by ordinance or resolution and shall include, but not be limited to. And then number 1 is to appoint and provide for the compensation and duties of the clerk of council and such other assistants for the council as a whole as the council determines to be necessary for the efficient performance of its duties. So that has to be done by resolution.
Mr. Mayor?
Madam Chair, that's exactly my point. I concur with the consensus of council that we bring Joe Nanny on, but we haven't created the chief of staff position. We don't have his duties. I mean, this all should be adopted formally. But in the interim, until we do that, he's employed now, we're continually employed, but I think we've got to designate the position and put what the duties and so on. But in the meantime, he's available to work on an interim basis.
Can we get that on the agenda possibly for Tuesday then, this coming Tuesday? Okay. Mr. Rogers and Mr. Schrein?
Thank you. Yeah, I have to agree with Mr. German. I think that we have to make sure and be clear that we, are clear on what the process is, that we are actually creating a position, there's a formal job description along with it, and that we post the position. So if we have to do something on an interim basis, I think that's what we need to do as a council.
Mr. Schrein?
And I was going to reiterate the same thing Ms. Rogers was saying, and that we use that same standard to which we just acknowledged earlier, that an interim appointment can't run for more than 60 days, but the position would be for no more than 60 days, in which time it gives us the opportunity for Nanny to be the interim chief of staff, in which time we actually fill in the details of job description and all the other steps. But we can satisfy both needs, our immediate need for an interim and the need for living within the standards.
Madam Chairperson, I clearly get the message and the consensus of the council.
All right, is there other business before the council or for our work session this evening? All right, this has been very beneficial, and be sure, and we'll get the agenda up and running. Be sure and take a look at that. It will be Friday morning, Jean, that we'll have it.
Yes.
So that we won't have any, if there's any questions, call us and make sure if it's people that you want here, staff you want here, because it's going to be no longer a weekend job to go over this agenda.
Madam Chair, can I just state, there was an article in the Plain Dealer today concerning elected officials in municipalities and so on. And in between meetings, I've been informed, that we do know legal requests for interpretations and legal opinions are being forthcoming. And I just wanted to say that for the record.
All right, anything further? Okay, yes.
I missed Mr. Germana's statement.
I think she wants a clarification, Mr. Germana.
Well, I think the executive has asked for a legal opinion as to the ethics thing that we already passed, the state law, and so on, and the reason why this becomes crucial is, again, it's a time crunch. Okay, we do have the state law that we want to acknowledge and by, but the filing deadline is coming, and we need to have some definite that what the rules are going to be, so that people out there in the cities know what they can and cannot do. So that's the only reason that we need to get some final decision on these things.
Yeah, I do understand, and that is an issue that we're working on, and that we discussed in the earlier committee meeting.
Madam President, I'm sorry to belabor this. I had to step out of the committee meeting. So the position was that the committee sought a legal opinion to determine who and who may not be able to run for public office and still hold a county job. Was that what the discussion was?
No, we never got that far. We were just talking about definitions. We never got that far.
Left it. Then what clarification, Mr. Germana, are you seeking out of that committee? Or are you just doing it outside the committee?
There's people calling and asking me what is happening, how's this going to be interpreted, what's the executive doing, how's he going to enforce it, and I don't know. I've had some informal contact with Bob Ivory and so on. He knows what the issue is. So I just wanted, this is a public meeting. These are some of the things that we're discussing and we're going to bring to a head. And I just wanted to make it, in a public meeting, stating that we're working on it and we don't have the final. I think we have an inclination of which way this is going. But until there's a legal opinion, we won't have it definitely.
Is there a motion do we need a motion to adjourn? We didn't formally. All right. The work session. Okay, motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, I move we adjourn.
Second. Second. Moved and second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.